You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, and you start doing that dreaded sleep math? You look at the clock, it's like 1:0 a.m., and your brain goes, okay, if I fall asleep right this exact second, I can get exactly 5 hours and 42 minutes.
Oh, yeah. And then 10 minutes pass, you haven't fallen asleep, and you have to recalculate the whole thing.
Exactly. It is just pure, unadulterated anxiety. I mean, we've all been trapped there. In our modern, always-on lifestyle, we tend to view sleep as this annoying biological tax we have to pay, or, just lost time that we could be using to get ahead.
Right, which is a completely backward way of looking at it, but it's how society has trained us. We treat sleep like like a power-down state for a machine. You plug the phone into the wall, the screen goes black, and it just sits there passively doing nothing.
But when you look at the actual neurology, that analogy just completely falls apart for me.
It really does. When you close your eyes, your brain isn't shutting down at all. It is actually booting up one of the most sophisticated, active, and strategic biological restoration systems in existence.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to completely shift how you view your time in the dark. We are pulling from two absolute heavyweights in sleep science today.
Yeah, first we have Dr. Matthew Walker's groundbreaking lab research in his book, Why We Sleep.
And then we're taking those clinical insights out into the high-stakes real world with elite sports sleep coach Nick Littlehales and his book, Sleep Revolution.
It's a really powerful combination because it bridges the gap between understanding the deep biology of our brains and actually applying it when the pressure is on.
Right, by blending these two perspectives, we can dismantle a lot of the modern myths that we've been fed, especially this incredibly rigid, anxiety-inducing idea that you must get exactly 8 consecutive hours of sleep every single night.
Which is a myth that causes more harm than good, honestly.
I have to admit, that 8-hour rule has haunted me for years. It feels like a pass or fail test every night. But before we get into how to optimize our routines and maybe stop failing that test, I want to understand the foundational machinery here. Beyond just feeling tired, what is actually driving our need to sleep?
So to really grasp that, we have to look at the two-factor model of sleep. It's essentially a constant negotiation between two really powerful forces inside your body. The first is your circadian rhythm.
Right, the internal 24-hour biological clock.
Exactly. It's deeply sensitive to external cues, primarily daylight and temperature drops. Your circadian rhythm is what dictates those natural peaks of alertness and the valleys where you feel completely lethargic.
So that explains the 3:0 p.m. slump, where I feel like I need a nap, even if I haven't done anything physically exhausting. But what is the second force competing with that rhythm?
The second force is called sleep pressure, and this one is purely chemical. From the very moment you wake up in the morning, a chemical called adenosine starts building up in your brain.
Adenosine. Got it. And it just keeps building.
Yeah, it just steadily accumulates, hour by hour, minute by minute.
I want to make sure I'm visualizing this correctly. Is it like water slowly filling up behind a dam? The longer you are awake, the higher the water level gets, and the more physical pressure is pushing against the dam walls.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. The physical pressure of that adenosine buildup creates a profound biological urge to sleep. You just can't stop the water from flowing.
Wow.
And when your circadian rhythm naturally dips at night and your adenosine water pressure is at its absolute peak, the dam is ready to open.
Yeah.
That's when you feel that overwhelming, heavy-eyed urge to close your eyes. Sleep is the only mechanism that opens the floodgates and clears the reservoir.
But hold on, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. What about caffeine? Millions of people, myself included, use coffee to clear that sluggish feeling. Doesn't that lower the water level behind the dam?
Ah, that is the great illusion of caffeine. It doesn't clear the adenosine at all. Caffeine actually works by artificially plugging up the adenosine receptors in your brain.
Oh, so the adenosine is still there.
Yep. It's like putting earplugs in so you can't hear the alarm bell ringing. The water behind the dam is still rising. The adenosine is still accumulating.
Oh, wow. So when the caffeine finally wears off.
Exactly. When the earplugs come out, you don't just feel the pressure you had an hour ago. You feel all the accumulated pressure that built up while you were artificially stimulated. That is the dreaded caffeine crash.
That is terrifying. So you are just borrowing energy from tomorrow at an incredibly high interest rate. But what is all this built-up adenosine and metabolic waste actually doing to our physical brain tissue if we don't clear it out?
Well, this leads us to one of the most incredible physical phenomena in the human body. It's called the glymphatic system. For decades, scientists were totally baffled by how the brain cleared out its waste.
Because the rest of the body has the lymphatic system.
Yeah, the body has plumbing to flush out toxins, but the brain doesn't have that. We only recently discovered that during deep sleep, the brain's glial cells, which are the essential support cells around your neurons, actually shrink.
Wait, they physically change size inside your skull?
Yes, they reduce in size by up to 60%. And by shrinking, they create these wide open channels throughout your dense brain tissue.
That is wild.
It is. And this allows cerebrospinal fluid to rush in and literally wash through the brain. It acts like a high-pressure power washer, flushing out all the metabolic waste and structural proteins that built up during your waking hours.
That is staggering to think about. It's literal brainwashing, but, in a good way.
Exactly. And one of the primary toxins it clears out is beta amyloid. That is a sticky, toxic protein that is heavily associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease.
So if you don't sleep deeply, that power washer never turns on.
Right, and the sticky plaques just continue to build up day after day.
Which gives entirely new weight to a quote from Dr. Walker that I found deeply unsettling. He writes, "Wakefulness is low-level brain damage, and sleep is neurological sanitation."
It's an intense way to phrase it, but biologically accurate.
The simple act of keeping our eyes open is wearing the brain down. But this brings up a massive evolutionary puzzle that Walker highlights. If we look at human history, sleep seems like a terrible survival strategy, right?
Oh, absolutely. When you're unconscious for 8 hours, you can't gather food, you can't protect your family, you can't reproduce, and you are highly vulnerable to predators. From a purely survival of the fittest standpoint, sleep is the ultimate evolutionary liability.
Right, so if it's such a massive risk, evolution should have phased it out millions of years ago. The fact that it didn't, the fact that every single species on Earth sleeps, means it must serve an absolutely vital, non-negotiable function.
Yes, exactly.
Yet humans are the only species that intentionally deprives itself of sleep for no rational reason. Why do we do this to ourselves?
It really reveals a certain arrogance in modern society. We somehow believe we can hustle our way past 4 billion years of evolutionary biology.
We really do.
A lion doesn't force itself to stay awake to get more gazelle hunting done. It obeys its biology. We are the only ones who invent artificial daylight through our screens, block our receptors with stimulants, and proudly wear sleep deprivation as a badge of honor.
Yeah, claiming we'll sleep when we're dead.
Yeah.
Which, as Walker's research shows, that attitude will get us to the grave much faster. But let's move beyond the physical power washing of toxins. Because we aren't just accumulating physical waste during the day, we are taking in massive amounts of complex information, memories, and often really stressful emotional experiences.
That's a great point. What is the brain doing with all of that abstract data? That is where the architecture of the sleep cycle comes in. We don't just drop into one flat, dark state of unconsciousness.
The cycle through stages.
Right, highly distinct stages. Primarily non-rapid eye movement, or NREM sleep, and rapid eye movement, or REM sleep. And they each perform entirely different surgeries on your memory and emotions.
The sources use a really vivid metaphor here involving a sculptor. I'd love for you to walk us through that because it totally changed how I view learning.
The sculptor metaphor is brilliant. Think of your waking brain as a raw block of marble. During the day, you are constantly absorbing data like reading emails, having conversations, navigating traffic.
Just a constant stream of input.
Exactly. And all of this initial data goes into your hippocampus, which functions like your brain's short-term inbox. But the hippocampus has a very limited capacity. If you don't empty it, you literally cannot learn new things the next day.
It's like your computer telling you the startup disk is full.
Precisely. So when you enter deep NREM sleep, your brain acts like a sculptor holding a heavy mallet and a large chisel. It powerfully strikes away the large, irrelevant chunks of data from the day.
So it's deleting the background noise.
Right. It discards the stuff you don't need to remember, effectively clearing out the inbox. But then you transition into the lighter REM sleep and the tools change.
So NREM is the heavy chisel clearing the junk. What does REM do with what's left?
A REM acts as fine grit sandpaper. It takes the important information that survived the chisel, adds delicate details, connects it to your past experiences and existing knowledge.
Oh, so it's integrating the new info.
Yes, and safely moving it out of the fragile short-term hippocampus and into the secure hard drive of the neocortex.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's essentially like your brain is running a massive data defragmentation program. It's moving files, deleting the trash, and freeing up space so the machine runs smoothly tomorrow.
That's the cognitive side, yes. But REM sleep is also performing something even more remarkable on an emotional level. Dr. Walker calls it Overnight therapy.
Overnight therapy, I love that term.
During REM sleep, your brain enters a neurochemical state that is completely unique. The levels of a stress-related chemical called noradrenaline drop to absolutely zero.
Wait, zero?
Zero. It is the only time in your 24-hour cycle that your brain is totally devoid of this anxiety-inducing molecule.
So it's basically placing your emotions into a chemical sensory deprivation tank.
Exactly. In that perfectly safe, stress-free environment, your brain intentionally reactivates the difficult, traumatic, or stressful memories of your day.
That sounds counterintuitive. Why revisit the trauma?
Because it takes the sharp, jagged thorns of your waking life, a harsh conflict with your boss, a financial panic, a personal rejection, and it carefully files them down into smooth, harmless stones.
Oh.
You still remember the factual event the next morning, but the visceral, emotional sting has been surgically removed.
I was like, just sleep on it was just a polite way of saying calm down. But it is actual literal neuroscience. You are waiting for the overnight therapy session to finish.
And if you shortchange your sleep, especially if you wake up early with an alarm, which cuts off the REM sleep that heavily concentrates in the final hours of the morning, you wake up with a brain that hasn't finished therapy.
It is still drenched in stress chemicals. The thorns are still sharp. Which is terrifying when you think about how many people are driving to work and making huge financial decisions on 5 hours of sleep. But this naturally brings us to the elephant in the room. If this intricate, delicate surgery needs to happen every single night, how do we guarantee we get enough of it without falling back into that 1.0 a.m. sleep math anxiety?
This is exactly where Nick Littlehales' work comes in. He takes this out of the sterile lab and into the messy reality of elite sports. He works with top-tier athletes who travel constantly across time zones and perform under immense pressure.
And his entire philosophy is built on removing the psychological anxiety around sleep, right?
Yes,
Okay.
and his first target is completely dismantling the myth of the solid, unbreakable 8-hour block.
I have to admit, when I wrote his R90 method, I was a bit skeptical. He says sleep isn't a block of hours, but a series of 90-minute cycles. But wait, if I miss my bedtime and only get 4 90-minute cycles, that's just 6 hours. Haven't scientists like Walker been telling us for decades that 6 hours of sleep will ruin our health? How does Littlehales justify telling people 6 hours is okay?
It's a really important distinction to make. Littlehales isn't saying that 6 hours a night, every night, is biologically optimal. What he is doing is changing the measurement timeline to stop acute anxiety.
Okay, so expanding the window.
Exactly. Instead of obsessing over a rigid 8 hours per night, he suggests aiming for 35 90-minute cycles over the course of a whole week.
Ah, so it's about the weekly aggregate. That immediately takes the pressure off.
Yes, because, as we discussed with the Sculptor metaphor, it takes roughly 90 minutes for the brain to drop all the way down into deep NREM sleep and then right back up into REM sleep. That is one complete cycle.
Makes sense.
By tracking cycles per week, it shifts the pressure. If you have a late flight and only get 4 cycles tonight, you haven't fundamentally failed. You just make a slight adjustment, perhaps a daytime recovery cycle, or aiming for 6 cycles the next night to hit your weekly target.
And his practical application for this is brilliant. He uses this ocean wave metaphor that I just completely relate to. Let's say my target bedtime is 11:00 p.m., but I get caught up working late.
Happens to all of us.
Normally, I'd realize it's 11:20 p.m., rush to bed, throw the covers over myself, and lie there with my heart pounding, furious that my 8-hour window is shrinking by the minute.
Which triggers cortisol release and puts you in the absolute worst physiological state to initiate sleep.
Right. But with the R90 method, you view these 90-minute cycles like ocean waves. If you miss the 11:00 p.m. wave, you don't sprint into the water and flail around in the dark trying to catch it.
No, you accept that it crashed without you.
Exactly. You stay relaxed on the shore, read a book, keep the lights dim, and wait to catch the next perfect wave exactly 90 minutes later at 12:30 a.m.
It gives you permission to be human, it acknowledges that life happens, and it removes the panic that actually blocks sleep onset. Another crucial element of Littlehales' framework is respecting your specific chronotype.
Right, the whole owls and skylarks thing.
We throw those terms around to describe night owls or early birds, but people treat them as lifestyle choices or signs of laziness. They aren't. They are genuine, genetically dictated biological realities.
Meaning you can't just drink a green juice, set your alarm for 5:00 a.m., and magically force a genetic owl to become a high-performing morning person.
You absolutely cannot. An owl's circadian rhythm is naturally shifted later. Their core body temperature drops later, and their melatonin releases later.
So expecting a skylark to be brilliant at midnight is just as absurd as expecting an owl to be highly analytical at 6:00 a.m.
Exactly.
So what does this actually look like in a high-stakes environment? Because it's easy to say respect your chronotype on a podcast, but in the corporate world, the meeting still starts at 8 a.m. for everyone.
Let's look at the ultimate high-stakes environment where millions of dollars and national pride are on the line, the World Cup. Imagine it's late at night, a grueling soccer match has gone into extra time, and the manager has to select 5 players for a penalty shootout.
Historically, a manager picks the most famous players, or the guys who practice penalties the most.
The heroes of the team, right?
Yeah, exactly. But Littlehales argues that a truly elite manager chooses players based on their biological sleep type.
Oh, wow.
If it's 11:30 p.m., a genetically confirmed skylark's central nervous system is already shutting down. Their biology thinks it's time for bed. Their reaction time is blunted. Their spatial awareness is dropping.
Oh, and an owl.
At 11:30 p.m., an owl is right in their physiological sweet spot. They are hyper alert. So you put the owl on the penalty spot, regardless of who is more famous.
That is absolutely fascinating. It's not just about raw skill. It's about whose nervous system matches the clock at that exact moment. That is a massive competitive advantage.
And that relentless pursuit of hidden advantages is what defines the concept of marginal gains. This philosophy was heavily popularized by elite sports organizations like Manchester United and British Cycling's Team Sky. Right, the idea that you don't need a magical 50% improvement in one area. If you improve every single tiny detail of your operation by just 1%, the cumulative compounding effect is massive.
Exactly. And when they applied this marginal gains mindset to sleep, the protocols were wild. Team Sky didn't just tell their cyclists, hey, get some good rest before the big race. They treated sleep as a critical performance metric.
I read they provided custom portable sleep kits. Athletes slept on the exact same specialized mattress toppers with the exact same hypoallergenic pillows in the exact same posture, regardless of what hotel in France they were staying in.
They engineered total consistency. They even brought in medical staff to teach the athletes the surgically correct way to wash their hands.
Wait, hand washing. What does hand washing have to do with sleep?
Everything when you're looking at marginal gains. If an athlete catches a mild upper respiratory infection because they touched a dirty doorknob, their core body temperature subtly rises to fight the infection.
Oh, and that elevated temperature disrupts the sleep cycle.
Right. It increases micro-awakenings during the night, which pulls them out of deep NREM sleep. So washing hands correctly directly protects the physical quality of the sleep cycle.
That is next-level optimization.
Yeah.
But does all this obsessive tweaking actually yield measurable results on the field?
The data on physical performance and sleep is undeniable. When sports scientists analyze injury rates, the numbers are staggering. Athletes who average only 6 hours of sleep a night have a season-long injury rate of over 70%.
Over 70%?
Yes. Their micro tears aren't healing, their stabilizing muscles are fatigued. But for those who consistently sleep 9 hours, that injury rate plummets to under 20%.
Over 70%, down to under 20%. That is not just a marginal gain.
Yeah.
That is the difference between a Hall of Fame career and early retirement.
And it affects simple raw stamina, too. Physical exhaustion happens 10 to 30% faster if you operate on less than 6 hours of sleep. Your body's ability to clear lactic acid from your muscles is compromised.
You are quite literally a weaker, slower, more fragile version of yourself. Which brings us back to our own lives.
Sure.
We aren't cycling in the Tour de France, but we are under constant pressure.
Right.
And it strikes me that we spend thousands of dollars on smartwatches, supplements, and fancy orthopedic mattresses. But we completely ruin our biological clock by staring at a blue light emitting screen until the exact second we close our eyes.
It's true.
We're trying to decorate the roof while ignoring the foundation.
It's a perfect analogy. A $2,000 mattress is useless if your bedroom environment is biologically hostile to sleep. Littlehales emphasizes engineering a recovery room rather than just a bedroom.
And that process has to start long before your head actually hits the pillow, right? You need to build a 90-minute pre-sleep buffer.
Yes. And this is where we have to talk about blue light. We hear the term all the time, but why is it so damaging? Well, the human eye contains specific receptors that are highly sensitive to blue light because blue light is naturally emitted by the sun.
So when you stare at a phone or a laptop at 10:00 p.m., that blue light shoots into your eye and aggressively tricks your brain into thinking the sun is still high in the sky.
Exactly. This completely halts the pineal gland's release of melatonin, which is the hormone that acts as the starting pistol for your sleep cycle.
So your brain literally thinks it's 2:00 p.m. even though your body is exhausted.
Precisely. This is why you need to use tools to filter it out. There are software programs like F.Lux that you can install on your devices.
Oh yeah, I use that. As the local sun sets in your time zone, F.Lux automatically pulls the harsh blue frequencies out of your screen, shifting it to a warm amber tone.
Or better yet, switch to warm, dim lighting in your house and read a physical book. But it's not just light management. Temperature is incredibly critical.
I used to think a cozy, warm bedroom was the goal. But the sources note that a room at 25 degrees Celsius, which is about 77 degrees Fahrenheit, is often way too hot for quality sleep.
Far too hot. Remember earlier when we discussed the circadian rhythm? For your brain to transition into deep NREM sleep, your core body temperature must physically drop by about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, so if your room is too warm, or your blankets are too heavy, your body can't release that heat.
Exactly. It traps you in lighter stages of sleep. So a cool room is always better. It facilitates that necessary temperature drop.
And just as important as how we fall asleep is how we wake up. Jarring, blaring alarms are brutal. If you are pulled out of deep sleep by a siren, it triggers a massive spike in cortisol and a fight-or-flight stress response right out of the
So
gate.
your heart is racing before you even sit up.
The alternative is a dawn simulating alarm. It's a device that gradually brightens the room with light over 30 minutes, mimicking a natural sunrise and gently coaxing your circadian rhythm into wakefulness.
All of this engineering, the light, the temperature, the chronotypes, it fundamentally reframes our relationship with rest. And that includes daytime resting.
Ugh. The R90 program heavily advocates for controlled recovery periods, or CRPs, which is a very scientific way of saying naps.
Right. It is, but the terminology matters because it shifts the mindset. In high-performance corporate or athletic environments, a 30-minute midday CRP isn't viewed as laziness or a lack of motivation.
It is recognized as a highly strategic tool to clear out that midday adenosine buildup we talked about earlier.
Allowing you to reset your cognitive function and emotional baseline for the afternoon.
So, bringing this all together for you, the listener, we've journeyed through the deep neurology of brainwashing and overnight emotional therapy, and we've explored the elite performance hacks of 90-minute cycles and marginal gains.
If we distill all of this down, the core takeaway is that sleep is not a passive, annoying task. It is an active, highly strategic, completely free health prescription.
It is the ultimate biological operating system upgrade. It repairs your tissues, organizes your knowledge, and soothes your emotional trauma.
But it is a delicate system, and you have to consciously protect the environment it happens in.
And the good news is, you don't have to overhaul your entire life by tomorrow. Start with the marginal gains. Tonight, try calculating your sleep in 90-minute cycles instead of obsessing over getting exactly 8 hours.
See what time your alarm goes off, count backward in 90-minute blocks, and find your ideal target wave.
And give yourself that 90-minute tech-free buffer to let your brain know the day is actually over.
Treat your recovery with the exact same respect, planning, and dedication you would give to a crucial board meeting or a demanding workout. Because, biologically speaking, it is the foundation that makes both of those things possible.
To wrap up, we've talked a lot about how sleep optimizes our current way of living. But I want to leave you with a thought that expands beyond just feeling better at the office.
Oh, it's just a good one.
We've established that humans have strict, genetically dictated chronotypes. Owls and skylarks. For centuries since the Industrial Revolution, our entire society has forced everyone into a rigid 9-to-5 workday, punishing owls for their biology and demanding peak performance when their central nervous systems are asleep. If the science is undeniable that this chronobiological mismatch crushes productivity, creativity, and physical health, how much longer can the modern corporate structure justify the 9-to-5 model?
It's a great question.
As we understand sleep better, the most progressive, successful companies of the future might not just offer standing desks or free coffee. They might entirely abandon synchronized working hours to harness the biological peaks of their employees. So tonight, when you look up at that ceiling, know that the dark is working for you. Stop the sleep math, surrender to the sculptor, and just catch the next wave.